Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have a couple of the state's leading reporters, and we're going to get into the big stories of the week. But first, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, is on the program. We have a number of very important topics, and we're going to start with the Harrisburg Catholic Diocese has filed for bankruptcy, facing continued payments that they have to make for sexual abuse charges. We'll get to all of that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, sitting across from me is Pennsylvania's Attorney General Josh Shapiro. He's been on the program before, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of big news out there when we're talking about his office. But let's start, first of all, with the Harrisburg Catholic Diocese has filed for bankruptcy. By the way, when you say Harrisburg Catholic Diocese, we're not just talking about Dauphin County. We're talking about 15 counties in central and in central. We'll call it central and south central Pennsylvania. All right. Well, here's the fact. As you know, 301 priests were accused of abuse. The argument is that the diocese covered it up. They've made there are 112 survivors. 106 accepted compensation. We're talking about compensation over $12 million. So what? And you were heavily involved in this, with the grand jury. Go ahead.
Let's examine the facts.
Okay.
On August 14, 2018, we released that grand jury report, and it found, as you correctly pointed out, 301 predator priests. It found thousands of child victims. It found a conspiracy and cover-up that went from dioceses in Pennsylvania all the way to the Vatican.
Wow.
When you go and look at the Harrisburg Diocese specifically, there were 45 predator priests. 45 predator priests. And they were engaged in the conspiracy and cover-up. In fact, their bishop and their lawyers were engaged in efforts to try and silence us, the prosecutors, trying to make sure that the truth came out and stop the report from ever coming out. Thankfully, they were unsuccessful. Now, as a further slap in the face to victims, they are using a legal maneuver to shield themselves from transparency, to not meet their obligations to these survivors. And it's yet another sad chapter in what this Harrisburg Diocese and other dioceses have engaged in with regard to survivors here in Pennsylvania.
Well, where does this all go? I mean, is the argument now that they can, negotiate settlements in which they pay less, or not make settlements at all? I mean, the bankruptcy is going to put some limit on their payouts, right? Or no? You're the expert.
Here's what I would say. This is just another cynical attempt by this diocese to shield themselves from responsibility and to further issue a slap in the face to these survivors. I don't think it's much more than that.
All right. Well, there's a bunch of topics I want to get to. Let's talk about JUUL. This has to do with suing e-cigarette maker to stop the sales of e-cigarettes. What's your problem with JUUL?
Well, look, we have laws in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and our trade practices laws specifically state that if you're going to put a product out on the market, you got to be honest with consumers about what's in the product and the effects of the product. I sued JUUL, which is the largest e-cigarette or vape company out there. They've got more than 60% of the market share. And in our lawsuit, I think we proved pretty clearly, they'll obviously come back and try and defend themselves now, that they were not honest in their marketing, that their nicotine levels and added chemicals were at a much higher rate than what they specifically laid out.
The more I read about what people are ingesting, in a whole variety of ways, it's dangerous to their health.
It's dangerous. I would say public health experts are pretty clear that it's a horrible thing to be putting into your lungs. But here's the thing, I'm the chief lawyer for the Commonwealth, and my responsibility is to make sure that the laws are followed. And in this case, JUUL didn't follow the law because they were not straight about their product. They lied about what was in it. And furthermore, they engaged in a deceptive marketing practice specifically targeted at children here in the Commonwealth. And sadly, Terry, they were successful. Let me tell you this. The teen smoking rates in 2017 was 12%. It was actually approaching an historic low.
Low, right.
3 years later, as a result of JUUL, a third of high school students in Pennsylvania are using these e-cigarettes.
I try to keep my own judgments and comments to a minimum, but but someone who works with millennials and Gen Z, it's horrible. It's terrible.
It's terrible. It's terrible for kids. And look, there are those out there watching who may disagree with me, and they'll say, "Look, I have every right to use an e-cigarette." And here's what I would say. If you're an adult, you do have every right to make that choice. But here's the other thing. You elected representatives who passed laws that says if you're going to use a product, you should have the right to know what's in it. You should know what the effects are, and it should not be falsely advertised. In this case, that's exactly what JUUL did, and that's why we've taken them to court.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I'm going to talk about what the Attorney General has done with something he refers to as the Conviction Integrity Unit. We'll get to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, my guest at the moment is the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. And you announced a week or so ago the creation of something that you refer to as the Conviction Integrity Unit. I'm reading that to make sure I get it accurate. And what that will do, as you reported, it will review criminal convictions across Pennsylvania, and I'm going to quote, to ensure justice. What is the Conviction Integrity Unit? Why is it necessary?
Terry, it's important that we have justice in our justice system. And it's important to have a mechanism in place to be able to look at old cases, and if a mistake was made, new evidence has come to light, that you have an ability to go back and correct it. And I don't think any of us should say that what was done in the past should be sealed and done and never looked at again. I think we have a responsibility to make sure that we got it right and that any new information is taken into account. And what's unique about this is the first time we've ever had a statewide Conviction Integrity Unit. And so if you think about it, we're now set up to both review past cases within the Attorney General's office, but we're also set up, upon referral from a district attorney, to look at a case that was handled by a local district attorney. And at the end of the day, whether we exonerate one person, 100 people, or 0
but the bigger
people,
point is
the bottom line is having a mechanism in place to be able to do this work and ensure justice.
And look, in most cases, the criminals get convicted and it's proper, but there are people who are innocent in prison, and that's some of the comments by folks who are involved in criminal justice after you talked about that. Plus, there's a big concern now about parole, about probation, about commutations. We can ask the president that, but we won't have to. So all of that is under review in the legislature, and I'm sure in your office as well.
Sure, and I'm not involved in the parole process. I do sit on the Board of Pardons statutorily or constitutionally. I'm required to do that. And look, I've supported more commutations than every single Attorney General in the history of Pennsylvania combined. Combined, Terry.
Wow.
And the point there is, I believe in second chances. I believe in righting wrongs, and I believe in making sure that our criminal justice system is fair to all, no matter where you come from or what you look like or or what your socioeconomic status is. We see too many instances where the lack of counsel, the lack of effective counsel, the lack of opportunity in our justice system often cause people to be sanctioned in ways that are simply unfair. This Conviction Integrity Unit is an attempt to try and deal with those wrongs and make them right.
All right, before I let you go, I ought to talk about something that I never knew existed before until your office released. Something called you call it ghost guns, I'll get that right. There's a loophole dealing with self-assembled gun kits. Do I got that right?
DIY guns.
What are ghost guns?
So, Terry, this is a serious issue. You can go now to a gun show in Pennsylvania and buy what's called an 80% gun or a ghost gun. It's essentially a gun in two parts. You go to table A, you buy one part. Table B, you buy the second part. Table C, you get the screws.
And then you put it together.
Put it together. Someone like me can even put it together, and I'm not the handiest guy in the world. Now, here's the thing. Those guns aren't illegal, and I'm not trying to stop any law-abiding citizen from being able to buy one, but here's the rub. Under our laws, a month or so ago, that wasn't considered a gun. So you could walk into a gun show, and we have undercover agents who have watched this occur, and buy dozens of these guns, throw them in a duffel bag, go out onto the streets of Harrisburg or Philly or Hazleton or Erie, and sell these ghost guns. They're unserialized, and they don't require a background check, which means they get into the hands of criminals. In fact, in Philadelphia, we've recovered almost 60 of these ghost guns that made their way from one of these gun shows.
You also
there.
say this is an epidemic. You use that term epidemic.
Yeah, gun violence is an epidemic, public safety and public health epidemic. And here's the thing, Terry. Here's what we can all agree on. I realize this issue gets charged. Here's what we can agree on. And that is that if you're a criminal and you fail a background check, you shouldn't be able to get your hands on a gun. We can protect law-abiding citizens' Second Amendment right to bear arms and make sure the criminals don't get their hands on them. So what I did was I issued formal legal guidance, which is within my purview as the Attorney General, saying these 80% guns, these ghost guns, should be treated the same as firearms for the purposes of requiring a background check. And look, if you're against a background check, well, then you and I are going to disagree on that issue. But I think most common sense Pennsylvanians look at this and say, we got to keep guns out of the hands of criminals while protecting law-abiding citizens' rights, and we're doing just that when it comes to these ghost guns.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the program. You're welcome here anytime. Anytime you have news, please give us a call. You're welcome. All right, coming up, two of the state's leading reporters, Marc Levy and Angela Couloumbis, join me, and we're going to get to some other important topics.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
In good shape. We have 10 minutes.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, joining me, as I indicated before, Marc Levy. He's with the Associated Press, and Angela Couloumbis. She's with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Angela, let me start with you. The Harrisburg Catholic Diocese and the bankruptcy. The Attorney General laid out sort of the basic facts. Any comments about that situation?
Yes, there were 2 points that were made by the lawyer for the Diocese of Harrisburg yesterday. One was that he thought this would be the first in a wave of bankruptcies for dioceses, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the nation.
Now, hold on. This is the first one in PA, correct?
This is the first one in Pennsylvania, and he believes that it will not be the last. And that is for a number of reasons. Really, the biggest one is that there's a lot of litigation out there that has kind of changed the landscape for both the church and for potential future lawsuits. The other point that he made, which I thought was interesting, was that he said that the parishes and the churches of today are going to look exactly like they did yesterday, meaning they're going to operate, they're going to open, nothing is shutting down. And what we learned through the bankruptcy filings is that is because a lot of their assets over the last 10 years have been moved into separate and distinct trusts.
Oh, there you go.
That at least the lawyers for the diocese are saying are separate and cannot be tapped.
Yeah. But I'm telling you, stunned when the grand jury report came, 301 clergy. I mean, that's stunning. We're not talking about 5 or 10 or 15. But when you get to 301, I was still, when that came out, I thought, you almost couldn't believe it.
And it's also hard to overstate the effect that grand jury report has had with other states following up and doing similar investigations, and it has spawned legislatures into action around the country.
While I have you, Mr. Levy, let's talk a little bit. I mean, we're going to be center stage in congressional races. We have 18 members of Congress, 9 Democrats, 9 Republicans. We have a couple of seats, one in the far southeastern in Bucks County and one in York and Dauphin and parts of Cumberland County. 2 Republican incumbents, and then we have a Democratic incumbent, Mark Cartwright, I'll get that right, up in the Northeast. Take it. What?
Yeah, so the districts were redrawn in 2018. They're much more competitive now. We're going to have some. We could have some more close races this year. There were a couple in 2018. There were more in 2018 that we thought would be close, and they weren't. But 54 people filed. Every sitting member of Congress is running again. Each will have a general election challenge. There will only be 3 primary challenges, but we have a lot of people running, a lot of Republicans running to try to knock off Matt Cartwright, the Democrat in northeastern Pennsylvania.
8th congressional district, if I have that number right.
Brian Fitzpatrick, the Republican running for re-election in Bucks County. That is a very closely divided district, and he's a survivor. He's won 2 elections already. Connor Lamb, the Democrat in suburban Pittsburgh, is running.
17th, way out in the western part of the state.
Pittsburgh, yeah, it's a very closely divided district. He's running, and he'll have a general election challenge from a guy who's a war vet and is on Fox News regularly, sort of as a guest, and he writes action novels. So, and here in the Harrisburg-York area, there will be a very high-profile contest with Democrat Eugene DePasquale, the outgoing Auditor General, running to try to beat the sitting Republican rep, Scott Perry.
And he has a Democratic opponent who was on the program, Mr. Breyer, and Eugene DePasquale will be invited to talk about the campaign as well. So there's also the effect that the national election will have. I mean, you got a huge, it looks like we're going to have a record turnout. You get many voters who haven't voted before and probably a lot of straight party tickets. That could also have a profound effect on these races, right?
Right. Now, Pennsylvania just banned the straight party ticket option on ballots. So this will be the first year where voters will not have the option just to click one button and vote all the way down for one party. They're going to have to click each office.
I used to say pull levers. Now it's push buttons, right? Or check. Put a check.
Well, most states have gone to paper ballot, or most counties have gone to paper ballots now. So, but. Yeah, in the top of the ticket, people are talking about it. Democrats are hoping that they're still going to have more of an anti-Trump backlash, and Democrats are starting to worry about what happens with Bernie Sanders at the top of the ticket. Does that mean that moderates go against them and their down-ballot candidates lose?
All right, when we come back, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about 2 things, if we have time, retirements in the legislature, and maybe pick up some of the important aspects of the budget, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, I'm talking with a couple of the state's leading reporters, Marc Levy and Angela Couloumbis, and I'll tell you something, there's big change going on in Harrisburg, and I know we get into the details, but the leaders matter. We've got the state legislature does so many things that directly involve and impact the residents of the state. So why should we care? I mean, this leadership change in both the House and the Senate.
Well, people should care about it for one simple reason. They make the decisions as to what legislation really reaches the floor, and that impacts people's lives in so many different ways. And in this year, we've had the two top leaders in both chambers announce that they're not running for re-election. That leaves essentially an opening for new blood at the top, a new direction potentially. And in Harrisburg, in the Capitol, where there have been quite a few complaints about how difficult it has been to get things done because of just the nature. There's very little bipartisanship, and there's a lot of infighting. So there is that potential. Having said that, again, this is a big election year, and at the end of every two-year legislative session, which this year the legislature's two-year session ends, you always have a slew of retirements and the ability for new blood.
So we have Mike Terzai, the Speaker of the House, and he's from Allegheny County, and we have Joe Scarnati, the President Pro Tem of the Senate, and he's from Jefferson County, correct?
That's
and so that whole division, I mean, that whole change, I should say, and there's sort of people in the wings waiting, if I got it right. Go ahead.
Yes, so they're going to try between now and November to at least in both parties to try and minimize the the race for leadership. So there might be a lot of negotiating between now and then to try and really sort of handpick who's going to run for those big positions.
All right. We do have a budget proposal that the governor made. The governor was on the program and talked about it. We had some reaction. So, well, as you look at the budget proposal from the governor, it's up 4.1%. There's no way the Republican-controlled legislature is going to give him that kind of an increase. Give me one or two of the major disagreements.
So look, the governor has floated out some things that he's already floated out, and it's still clear that they're probably going nowhere, but he's got a couple new things. One is paying for college scholarships by diverting money from horse racing subsidies. Now, in talking to Republicans, they like the idea of college scholarships, but it's clear that diverting the money from horse racing subsidies will be divisive for both Republicans and Democrats. Pennsylvania has a big higher education problem. It ranks at the bottom of all the states when it comes to studies on college affordability, student debt, and state support.
Is number two, but they're real low. You're right. I think it's $36,000 or $37,000 on average. Go ahead.
For new graduates. So that's one thing. The other thing is he's looking for $1 billion to help schools clean up asbestos and lead. And you've seen some big city schools, particularly Scranton and Philadelphia right now, that are struggling with that cost.
And let me stop you there. I mean, the safety of our kids in school is it's hard to figure out when we're talking about education. Now, we want kids to learn, obviously, but boy, they have to be in a safe environment. No?
Now, something may happen with that. Right now, Republicans say, well, you know, schools in my district already cleaned up 30 years ago or 20 years ago. They did this. But this state has all but stopped its school construction aid program. So there may be pent-up demand, and they may restart it, and that may satisfy some of the need for help with cleaning up lead and asbestos.
All right, we're almost out of time, but I got to ask you this question. This budget's going to get done on time. The lawmakers, by June 30, the lawmakers don't want to be in Harrisburg during the course of their re-election.
Absolutely, and I think these are some of the issues that are going to get maybe pushed to next year for a resolution.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. And whether we're talking about the Marcellus shale tax, which the governor has said time and time again, it looks like. Well, look, as always, I want to thank you for coming on. Great update, and we'll have you on soon. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.